Friends, welcome back to the Film Alchemist podcast, the show where we look at movies we love, break them apart, to find out what gives them their magic. I'm your host, Josh Griffey, joined as always by my friend, co-host, and Daniel Baldwin cosplayer.
It's the meanest thing you've ever said to me.
Show's
Alex
over?
Dandino.
All right, Alex is going to hang around. Show's probably over after this, so enjoy.
Show's probably over, though. That Danny Baldwin comparison. Wow.
I don't think being a Baldwin is the worst thing you could be.
I think being Danny Baldwin's the worst thing you can be.
I mean, I could have called you Twitter James Woods. All right, guys.
Definitely worse.
If you're joining us today, thank you, and we hope that you love the show. If that's the case, please take a second and leave us a rating and review wherever you find the show, especially Apple Podcast app, guys. That helps us out enormously. And for those of you that have done that, thank you. We appreciate it very much. You can also see the faces that make these voices on our YouTube channel, Nerd Alchemist. That's plural with an S at the end. You can also email the show, filmalchemistpod@gmail.com, with your ideas, suggestions, on movies you'd like to see covered, new, old, themes, double features, people to have on the show, anything like that. We love to hear from you. Another way you can get a hold of us, we're on all the social media you guys are on. Just look for Film Alchemist Podcast, guys. That's enough business. Now let's dive into a film that has the hardest working vampire hunters maybe ever in a film.
I don't know.
Today we're talking about John Carpenter's Vampires. I have not seen vampires in a long time. I think it's a fascinating study in what happens when a director goes back to the well long after that well had maybe been plumbed up. But you can see so many of the awesome John Carpenter things that we all love in the movie Vampires. Right. With some extra things that make it harder to want to spend almost 2 hours with. Alex, when's the last time you would watch Vampires, and what were your initial thoughts?
Man, the last time I watched Vampires was probably like high school.
Yeah, I felt like it was the same for me.
I feel like this is one of those movies that's on just movie channels a lot, and you see in chunks.
Yeah,
because it's like they like show it like 10 times in a row over like a course of like 7 days. So you see like, oh, I saw the beginning, middle, and end that way. I'll be honest, this might be the first time I've watched the movie the entire way through, like without breaks. Wow. I mean, again, it's not. Yes, like it has a lot of this great like John Carpenter stuff in it that I love, and I do think John Carpenter's, even though this movie is not his best movie, I think he's also like it's not his best movie. It also has a lot of room to breathe and be like a really good performance movie for some. But it's also weird to watch this movie in the context of 2020, knowing all we know about James Woods now. It's actually really difficult to not.
Let's
watch
pause
it
there.
That way.
Right. James Wood, I mean, maybe there are people that like who he's become. He's pretty much just an old piece of shit internet troll at this point, right? Like,
yeah,
just on Twitter being an asshole all the time. The weird thing is, I think you could argue, as my wife did the whole time she was not enjoying herself watching this movie with me, that James Wood is wildly hateable in this movie long before Twitter's even a thing. Almost as if James Wood is playing his future Twitter self on film, which is weird, right?
James Woods is a weird choice for this movie in general.
That's what I said. It's so strange because if this were cast in the 80s, you're like, this is probably like Tom Atkins, someone like that, right? Like one of these kind of like tough guy, everyman kind of actors, right? The thing,
yeah,
James Wood does not fit in this movie for a second, right? He doesn't look like a tough guy. He doesn't look like a guy who's been living on the road hunting vampires or could like inspire other people to do such.
No, he looks like a guy, he looks like a weekend warrior dad, like one of those guys who has a Harley. But I mean, like
I don't even think it's that. I think he's
only
the
drives
guy
on the weekends.
Yeah, I think he's the guy that works at like Wells Fargo, but he buys a 4 times bigger than his neighbor American flag and talks about how much service means to him, even though he didn't serve. It's strange, but even aside from that, it's just his role in this movie is strange because this is the weirdest thing about Vampire to me. And again, it's not as bad because the opening scene is fucking awesome and it draws you right in. You're like, fuck yeah, dude. Just like a work crew handling vampires. It kind of has like a D&D vibe. You're like, yeah, dude, I like this. I like the weapons. All that is great. The problem is that this does what John Carpenter does best, which is fill this world with awesome, fun characters to spend time with. And then, almost immediately, kills every fun character and leaves us James Wood and Daniel Baldwin and Valak, the 3 least interesting characters in the entire movie, and says, this is your lot in life. And thank God they send us the life preserver of the young priest later.
Yeah. Well,
who's
and
like something
dragging, and they're also, don't forget, they're also dragging around Laura Palmer like the entire movie. We'll
get to that aspect of it because again, the wife said, "Don't you dare not talk about that." And I was like, "All right." But it's just a strange thing because one of like the first 15 minutes are so awesome to me, right? I love the going into the house. It is weird though because they have this strange scene in the opening. I was like, "Oh, these guys suck as vampire hunters."
I thought that too.
They do the door, right? They have this machine that cuts a perfect hole in the door by pumping it. But he still has to reach his arm into a den full of hungry vampires to unlock it. It's like, move that shit around until the doors like swing open because there's no lock. But what I like, that actually really works because there is kind of this movie feels like it's a crew of construction workers, right? This isn't a crew of superhero, Lord of the Rings style band of the best of men going. No. These are just guys who've got a job to do and they're going in to fucking do it, right? Like John Goodman in Arachnophobia. They're just there to exterminate. That's their trade. I think that vibe works super well. And kind of the sloppy clumsiness of the clearing the nest with the, giant fucking spears and all the awesome weapons they have is super awesome. And the more you just see these like fucking pincushion vampire bodies being dragged out to explode. The first time the girl vampire jumps on and takes 50 bullets and looks up with the contacts, you're like, I'm loving everything this movie is doing.
Love the vampire kills in the beginning of this movie. Like, when they drag them outside and they just burst into, like, not just burst into, like, oh, they're on fire. Like, they're exploding into flames.
Which, by the way, is a better version to show us the curse of if you dare come out and look at the life-giving sun, you will fucking pay. Not like, oh, my skin, it's so burning.
Yeah, it's not like it's not a really bad sunburn. It's literally like they are exploding.
Yeah,
it's
like
awesome.
You are going to feel fucking agony as you explode. And that is fucking awesome, right? Like, I love the opening with this crew. We transition to a hotel where a cop has kind of called them in. The priest is in the room full. Like, we just cut to like, oh, we're doing butts at a hotel. That's like our transition shot. You're like, who could hate that? And then there's just like random prop boobs all around the room. Like, hey, can we have a girl with boobs out? And you get this cop, right? So this is the room we see with the priest in, who's like, every time they drag out a corpse, he's just, or a vampire, he's like, oh, dear God. And now all of a sudden he's slamming drinks with the hookers. And we find out they're running a secret deal with cops, which is, I've been running whores and clearing out liquor stores for weeks preparing for this crew. And I was like, fuck yeah, dude. We got Mark Boone there. You got all these kind of like tough, awesome looking. Yeah, right. Who I am slowly Pokemon evolving into. You have all of these just fucking awesome slayers, right? So you're like, all right, you've got the spear guys. That can be a whole crew. So like my D&D brain is like, I want to meet these kids. This scene is like the best scene. If you play Dungeons and Dragons, one of the worst thing that happens is when a DM's like, we start in a pub. What beer do you order? You're like, fucking fuck. What you really want to get to is everyone telling you the fucked up things they did to their characters. And that's what you're waiting for here because they're sitting there, with these whores. And it's like, what do you do for work? I kill vampires. And Mark Boone, I think, has the line, which is like, we do that, but that means we know there's a God. And he just goes, and we don't understand that motherfucker. And I was like, oh my God, yeah. Like, I want to hear these guys, like, doing
it's a good beat.
Yeah, I want to hear them extrapolate on that. Next thing you know, we just cut to a crushed velvet coat And you're like, well, that's never good. Like, that's not what you want to see at your butts party. And next thing you know, we're doing amazing fucking vampire murders. Amazing.
Yeah.
But
The
me
first
as the
one
watcher
is like one of my all-time faves.
Oh, dude,
Just
when they
like
do the torso rip on Boone, oh, it's fucking. They do a heart punch. They have amazing kills in this.
There's a lot of cool shit.
Right. The problem is that as the viewer, I'm sitting there watching, and you're like, these are the guys I wanted to spend the movie with.
Yeah.
It's like if the Thing killed everyone except for McCready and Doc in the first 15 minutes, that's not a great movie anymore. Like,
Yeah,
I wanted to spend time with them, and you're coming to this realization, like, oh my God, I'm just left with Woods and a Baldwin.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the problem with the movie in and of itself, is that you introduce all these cool, like, and if they got picked off one by one as they traverse, I'd be a little more, okay, cool.
That is the exact vibe. I wanted to see the kind of, oh, fuck, we missed. They kind of did this. Like, now he's the Lord of Night. And as we get into, Valak is this super important vampire. That's awesome. What if they're racing to the Thing exactly like him? Because this is the thing. They show us this truck that's full of awesome weapons and all these different styles they could have had of fighting. And we're just like, nope, we're not doing. Now we're going to drive in like a stolen, beat up old man car.
Yeah, that's the problem too. Is like, I feel like it's such a weird movie because I do enjoy aspects of it, but this is the thing that's so frustrating: is they take away all of the cool people, and then immediately they take away not the armored car that has all the cool shit in it. They drive away in the fucking
but it doesn't serve a purpose
truck.
once you don't have your gang.
Right, exactly. So they drive away in the fucking beater truck, which then flips over, and then they have to steal a car. And I'm like, so all the things that were awesome about the first 15 minutes of this movie are gone. The only thing we're left with, like you said, is a Woods and a Baldwin. And again, it's a weird choice. I guess it kind of works because if you want to give James Woods room to move, I'm not really sure, to be honest with you.
But
I don't think it doesn't work for me.
Right.
But
with the character of Crow, they never grow it. All he does every scene is, don't make me whoop your ass. Or
that's
he has two lines, which is, don't make me beat your ass because I'm tough. Right? Or, hey, tell me about your dick.
Yeah.
Those are the two James Woods lines in this movie.
That's like every line in this movie, or every scene in this movie is James Woods just like, he could just kick someone's ass at any moment. Like, there's never like a moment where I think he's being contemplative. I think at one point he's just like that scene
he's got no
later
time
on
for that.
Like that scene later on with the scene when they introduce the younger Padre, because that's the cool hip 90s name they give to all the guys.
The script writer's just like, I love terrible baseball teams. This is my chance.
Yeah. So, so like the Padre, so like the younger Padre, like at that scene, I was like, is he going to beat someone's ass? Like I remember watching and be like, I missed that. Like, cause that was the weird thing is like, now I just expected him to just haul off and hit someone for the hell of it.
Yeah.
But I actually thought about this and I wonder if this movie is more interesting, to be honest with you, if this starts like if you still do everything you were gonna do, but if this movie starts with James Woods getting bit and he has essentially 48 hours, I feel like this movie, it gives James Woods a reason to exist in this movie, because honestly like he just exists at this point to be a badass, so to speak, but like the 90s version of badass without any like reasoning for it. If you give him a ticking clock, which we have essentially anyways, if you give him one though, I feel like there's a lot more to play with, and there's a lot more for him to be like contemplative and shitty about. I don't know.
It's fun too because they use Laura Palmer for that, but not wildly effectively. No. I mean, what you're essentially saying is that you want James Wood, who's seemingly wimpy guy pretending to be Snake Plissken, have the actual neck bombs of Snake Plissken, which I actually am like, just do it. If we're just showing us what happens when you are the cool guy, 80s guy in your younger age and just grow up to be an annoying old piece of shit who hates his job, go all the way for it. Like, fucking do it, man. It is one of those weird things because I just feel like this is one of those movies where I like so much of what's happening when we're doing action and mythology.
Yeah.
In the moment we stop and they say, hey, the lesser Baldwin and Woods are going to try to emote, right? They're going to give you something. The movie becomes almost so painful I want to turn the TV off. Like James Wood 3 times just doing my dad was a vampire and he bit my mom. God. And I'm like, he has no emotion. You don't see it come through. And that's the weird thing is I actually think the reason you get James Wood Woods for this is because he is actually a really good actor. Right? Like
he's a good actor.
And that's what I mean. Like, you hire him for the scenes where he needs to emote, and he's just playing this, Stallone character that couldn't, you just look at him, you're like, he can't beat anyone up. He's never beat anyone up in his life. Like, one of the cool things about, but this is, okay, I'm going to back this up a hair, because I think in a weird way, while he feels like the most miscast character ever, it almost works really well. Because if he's actually a badass slayer, then because what we see a lot in this movie near the end is like this kind of folly of the Catholic Church, right? So one cool thing they tell us, right, in the mythology is that they created for this kind of banned exorcism that was supposed to be more of a punishment than like actually helping out. They end up creating Valak, the first vampire. That is a fucking great beat. So the idea of this, Catholic Church, it's a shady, corrupt shadow organization, and they're funding vampire slayer teams because they know what they did, but they want to cover it up. That's all great. Like, that part is really cool. And the thought that this priest has kind of let James Wood keep going at this rate, being such a prick and whatnot, knowing that he wants to betray him, that kind of works, that he's not this believable tough guy slayer. And like when you see him attack the girl, there's like 5 times when he's like fighting a vampire, and I think what they're trying to have us glean from that is, wow, look how tough the vampires are. But also it's like James Wood just seemingly fights like a wimp. He's like, die, you little fucker.
Yeah.
It looks like when my 5-year-old attacks me and I'm just like, you scamp.
Yeah, he has a lot of like weird outbursts when he's hitting people. Like, again, everybody has like weird little outbursts the way they like express. Like Billy Baldwin this is Daniel Baldwin. Danny Baldwin does it. James Woods does it. Like, they're all having this like, and it's weird because it's almost emoting, but all you're doing is stating frustration.
Yeah,
like,
but Baldwin is believable in his rage and like, I'll fuck you up. You're like, that looks like a guy who is like on the edge, right? There's just like a Baldwin-ness where you're like, that guy always looks like he wants to punch someone. He probably just did at breakfast. Like that guy took the last like powdered donut at Continental Breakfast. I'm going to fucking knock your teeth out. That's kind of what this Baldwin is bringing to the table, right? But there's just like the scene when like Wood is not walking away from the places that explodes and he's smoking cigars and tough time. It never feels right. And the weird thing is that I think what comes of it is it kind of shows you this baseline futility. Because one of the weird themes that the movie does explore pretty well is this kind of lost cause, right? Like, one of the things I love is when we find out that the Cardinals betrayed him, right? In the most obvious reveal of all time. You're like, well, there's only 2 other characters we've seen who aren't slayers. Obviously, the guy who's not, being attacked by James Wood for the 4th time did it, right? Like, when that Cardinal's like, this is one of the moments I fucking love, which is he's like, as I got older, I questioned my faith. He's like, I've never seen a miracle. I've never heard the voice of God. The only evidence he has of something beyond the grave or some power that is godly is Valak. Right. And he's like, yeah, I'll make this deal with the devil because at least it's tangible. That is a fucking awesome beat, right? Yes. But again, that feels like one of those, why not have Baldwin betray him? That's like the weird thing is there are so many characters on screen that don't feel like they're doing anything a lot, right? Like, there are guys running around and fighting and smacking women around, but
yes, in great multitudes.
This is the problem: is Baldwin has Baldwin and Wood have the same problem where both the characters are so hateable, right? So we see them do their job at the start. You're like, fuck yeah, vampire hunters. I like that. And then they're drinking and like with hookers. You're like, yeah, I can. All right, that's cool. Like I'd be down with that if I was like, you know, a non-married vampire hunter. Yeah, hookers and party. Let's go. Right on. Then you get to, you know, oh, well, we're just going to take this prostitute because she's meat. We're going to steal this guy's car. And then, but they each have one scene where they're like, this will win us over. And you're like, nope. Like when Woods goes back and he's like cleaning and burying his crew. I think what they want us to take from that is look at his honor. And I was like, it feels though once he gets in the room, it feels a little Mickey, right? From Natural Born Killers. It feels like he's like, more vampires to fucking chop up. Yeah. Like he's doing it. It's the weird thing where it's supposed to be this code of honor. And he's like, no, I'm just getting a murder boner.
Yeah, I would go beyond that. It honestly just felt like he was doing chores. Like we were watching a scene of someone just cleaning the house.
Yeah, it felt more angry to me than that. Like he's almost mad that they're such fucking losers.
I mean, I don't even know what the anger quotient is in this movie because honestly, like, I mean, James Woods and Danny Baldwin spent the entire movie pissed. So like, him to be angry that he was doing something is like kind of par for the course in this movie.
But that's what I mean. I think
not
that
necessarily
scene is supposed to be our honor among tough guys moment, right? Like he didn't leave him behind, and it doesn't play that way, right? It's so strange. The other weird part of the movie, like he's just packing the bag full of like mullets and beards, and he's like, "Oh, what a pain in the ass." He doesn't even dig like a proper hole or do a cross. He's just like, "Oh, here's a crevasse. Fuck you." Like it's not. It doesn't achieve what it wants to achieve. It feels like, right? And then we have the Billy Baldwin scene, which is easily the biggest head scratcher in the movie, which is he goes out to get the worst chicken sandwiches ever, right? So he can eat himself into a food coma and sleep on the couch, presumably. He comes back, and what we're introduced to is Laura Palmer, who is, you know, on her way to becoming a vampire. So she's tied up. All right, that part I'm with. Tied up on her stomach, butt naked, after he's bathed her, right? You know, unconscious from being smacked so many times, it seems like. And then he comes in and approaches her, and instead of being like, hey, I got us Chick-fil-A, you know, sorry you got bit by a vampire, but, you know, maybe we'll work together and be friends. He crawls up onto the bed like a humanoid from the deep, right? Just bellies up.
Yeah.
Gets his head right on her and is, like, creepily peeling the tape. And then as she rightly is, like, fucking terrified, he's like, hey, I'll snap your fucking neck like a twig. And she's scared as fuck. And then he's like, P.S. Please be really thankful at how fucking sweet of a guy I am. And it's like, what? And we're supposed to take that moment as, oh, look at this nice guy. And then he saves her from committing suicide. That could be a moment to build on. But because she, you know, is a vampire who saw blood and got hungry, I better backhand her.
Yeah,
it's so strange. In the rest of the movie, they have these moments where him and Woods are like face to face over like, she's mine to hit this. Like they're fighting over who gets to be the abusive piece of shit.
It's so weird.
But that's what I mean. Both of those scenes are a microcosm of what is strange about this movie. When they are trying to develop character, it feels so off and backwards and wrong. Because you're like, both of those scenes are supposed to somewhat show us that these are really tough murderers with the heart of gold. And they do the exact opposite. It so deepens the well of, this guy is an untrustworthy piece of shit creep.
Right.
It's fucking insane.
By that rationale, then, because I'm trying to get to the. I spent all afternoon after I watched this movie trying to figure out why exactly John Carpenter likes. Is it Jack Crow? Is that his name?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, why is this the character? Why is this character the star of this movie? And I thought about it a lot, and I realized, like, this character, like you were saying, is a grown-up, like, a character from the 80s transported in from one John Carpenter movie to the 90s John Carpenter movie. Like, a recontextualized character in the wrong century. So we're watching this movie, and we're trying to figure out, my question is this movie filled with people I don't like specifically because, though, I'm not supposed to favor anything regarding this. Like, I'm not supposed to favor vampires, obviously, because they kill people. But more importantly, am I even supposed to... I'm not supposed to relish in the fact that these guys are vampire hunters. It's not a profession that it's not a profession that anybody should be sought after for. Like,
see,
Jack,
that part with the profession, I don't know. I think you're absolutely onto something, though. Because one of the things that really struck me was the way that these guys hunting monsters, right? The theme of to hunt these monsters and do what they do, they seemingly become monsters themselves, right? They're these booze hound.
Exactly. They're horrible
whoremonger, hitting women. They don't matter. And we see that with the Laura Palmer character. James Wood has the creepiest seduction. You're like, man, thank God she's getting paid, because how does that work? Right? Like, if I was a hooker, I'm like, I would be completely dried up the moment James Wood ran a line on me. I'd be like, see ya. I'm out of here. I don't care how much money you have. Fuck you. And, she's still going to do it, right? She's doing her job. And Valak gets her, and there is this moment where she smiles, right? It's almost this weird orgasmic thing. That's another one of those. I'm like, why did you add that? Okay, never mind. Get past that.
Right.
The rest of the moment she's bitten, they start, like when they get out of the car, James Woods they show the montage of them walking, right? The lesser Baldwin just wiping bacon grease off his face, and they're just like taking turns like throwing the girl on the ground. You're like, that's not helping you get where you're going faster. You're just like, fuck you, you fucking vamper, right? They're just like being assholes the whole time. And so there is a point where we're watching, you're like, man, these guys fucking suck. I was talking to you. I can't think of a movie that has two less likable leading characters that we're supposed to somewhat root for and watch. Like, by the end of the movie, I was like, yeah, go with Valak. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, fucking take us all out. Like, is there one human in this movie that I care if they die? No.
No.
But that gets to what they do and what they become. And especially as we start to learn, there's this other subplot of why has the church made this so secretive to the guys whose job it is? There's kind of a hopelessness to them. And it's not impossible to see why they've become such horrible pieces of shit.
Right. I mean, I think in that regard too, that's what makes the movie, that's what makes these characters not likable at all, but at least a little more interesting, is that they do what they do in sort of the futile hope that things will change. And I think that at least is a little more interesting, because vampire hunting, from all the other movies we've watched and all the other comics and all the other books we've read, vampire hunting is not necessarily a futile pursuit, but sorry, I was saying futile for some reason. But more importantly, it's about the pursuit of your own personal brand of justice. And it's strange that, like, Jack has that version for himself, but it's weird that there's not a scene in the movie earlier on where he literally looks at the clergy and he's like, fuck you guys. Like, I'll just do this myself. Like, you can't just employ me.
I mean, he does when he doesn't. He's like, I'm not going to go back and reform the team. I think that's supposed to be that moment.
He does, but it's also, for me, it's supposed to be that moment, and also, like, it's also the plot device for not having to cast 6 new actors for a movie. But, like, and that's like,
the Cardinal is us, the audience, like, please God, bring back more Slayers.
But that's, to me, like, the futile nature of vampire hunting within the context of this movie makes them at least mildly more interesting, because you realize the reason they're not good at their jobs is because they're fucking tired. These guys are like dog tired of doing it. Because I start that movie that way, and yes, obviously they seem badass and everything, but by the end, all of them are, to me, just terrible at hunting vampires. Truly god awful. Like, there's nothing about.
I mean, it's rough by the end, but yeah, they're at their wits' end at that point.
Yeah, exactly. They're tired. They're over it.
It's hard, though, but, I mean, there are a lot of characters that are at their wits' end, right? They're tired of the fight. They don't want to... Like, a great example is Leon, the professional, right?
Yep.
That's a guy who just wants to spray his plants. But then he's called into action one last time. There's one shot to do something that matters. And there are just ways to do that with characters that have hit the end of their hard, bloody roads, right?
Right.
Falling down. There are movies like that, you know? And these two main characters are just so hard to swallow. There is
yes.
I mean, it works in a way where there's something I've always thought about vampire slayers, where a lot of them feel like guys who are like, I better go kill those vampires because I'm fucking jealous of their awesome lives.
Yeah,
they're like, I want to live forever and wear velvet and, you know, have harems of Dracula wives. And they're like, I better go stake that motherfucker for having what I don't want. Which, again, come to find out, is James Wood's greatest passion in life. Because that's the thing. You think that he's seeing Valak, and he's like, dude, when Valak and the other 7 masters exit the grave, like that fucking Creed music video shot.
Love that shot.
Where you're like, I see them walking out, and it's cool. You're like, but right after that, there must be like at least 10 minutes of, hey, can you get the dust off of my crushed leather jacket?
Oh, please get the dust out of my hair. Yeah. Oh, look at my crushed
also, as a guy who now has
so messed up.
Yeah, as a guy who has very long hair now, there's also got to be a lot of brushing going on, leaving conditioner. Yeah. Like, you know, there's stuff that has to happen off screen that makes them not as cool.
They sleep in the dirt, but they're actually right outside like a Holiday Inn Express. So they can like, oh, God, let's finally, oh, yes, okay, good. Let's get everyone,
God.
Everyone, 5 minutes in the shower, though. 5 minutes. We only have enough money for one room, so 5 minutes each. Nobody take too long.
You know they don't like to refill those tiny conditioners, so be sparing, yeah.
Guys, I put up my Paul Mitchell. Don't worry. It's fine. Yeah. We all share.
This is why we can't drink Paul Mitchell. We relies on him, yeah. We're just riffing now on vampires and hotels. That's where this movie sent us. But the jealousy aspect I thought was kind of fun. And I mean, when the priest comes in, this was my question, right? When you're like, James Wood should have been bitten, that feels very Escape to New York for me. My question is, why not bring the priest in the very first mission, right? This is the new guy. And so as he's seeing them brutally murder these corpses and corpses explode, he's like, oh, God. And they're just like, you're just a bookworm. You know, and they're like tough talking him. And, you know, he's like, I'm going to start cutting on you because, you know, my name's Crow and I want people to believe I'm tough. Right? Like, James Wood is in this movie to a tough guy what I say Jared Leto is to the Joker, right? In Suicide Squad, whereas he's not really playing the Joker. He's a guy who desperately wants people to believe he's the Joker. That's why he has to like tattoo ha 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 on his hand.
Right.
That's what James Wood is, right? So I just don't know if there's a world where these Slayers can ever really be our conduit, right? Like Billy Baldwin's character, Montoya, you're like, maybe he could have gotten there because the love angle with the girl that he has definitely been assaulting and smacking around, you're like, maybe if you creep that down a hair less, you could get there. James Wood, if he maybe actually cared about his parents, you could get there. But, you know, I think the priest is actually, he feels like the perfect bridge between this theology, like the great mission of the church, which feels impossible, and not having ever felt the touch of God, but constantly dealing with evil. And the Slayers who are out in the field dealing with it and being corrupted by their pursuit. He feels like the perfect lens to take this adventure in.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you bring him in first thing, yes, I agree. Like he's the us. He's definitely the audience avatar in that regard. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's interesting though. Like they drop hints to try to make James Woods like a good guy. Like they really tried, but it happens so late in the movie. Like after Danny Baldwin smacks the shit out of her for biting him, he comes in and he's like, what's that bruise on her jaw? I'm like, man, you don't give a shit. Why are you even bringing it up? Like
you were just pushing her down in the hot road after she was concussed.
It's all these weird little things.
That's mine to punch around. I'm the boss over here. I'll be doing the domestic abuses.
They spend so much of the movie letting them like be just total assholes. When they have these little redeeming moments, you're just kind of like, I don't care, which is good and bad, I guess. But at the same time, it runs afoul of the ability you should have to glob onto vampire hunters, ridding the world of like this horrible evil. You're like, they are just as bad. If anything, there needs to be vampire hunters, and that's the movie we should be watching.
Yeah, right. Like we need someone to go kill these motherfuckers, you know. But this is what I mean. That's a great example of what is so strange about this movie because The vampires are awesome. The murders are awesome. The mythology is awesome. The opening scene when we see a full Slayer team in action is awesome. Some really good deep themes. Here's a great example. So we see James Woods' character. They did their mission. He didn't get the master, but he's willing to hook up with this prostitute and be one of the guys. Wink, wink, like loving it. He goes from that to, if you took like 3 scenes out, right? So maybe he doesn't call her, oh, she's a piece of trash, I can use and abuse her, and throws her in the car. Maybe he's like, I can save you, and throws her in the car, right? Nice. Puts her in the cab of the car. Now you have, oh, he does care. There is a reason he's on this mission. He actually cares about human people. Right. And then when they crash the car, instead of him being like, yeah, I better push her down a couple times, have him actually help her. Right? If you just change those 2 small moments, by the time he gets to the hotel and he's like, hey, did you hit this lady who's defenseless? And he's like, yeah, so what? Then he punches Baldwin, and now you've got, at least he has some honor. But then Billy Baldwin punches him for talking shit about her at the church because
which is weird.
He had already tied her down and would have human centipeded her. Like, what? Like, the logic is baffling.
I always thought that moment was because he was slowly turning, so he's like feeling more protective of her. But again, that's also me like trying to movie logic my way into enjoying the performance of one Daniel Baldwin.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little Stockholm-y thing going on with them, maybe.
Yeah, I read this. Did you know that actually Alec Baldwin had accepted the role before Danny got cast, and he had to bail during pre-productions and suggested his brother?
I bet he did. Hey, I have a brother who drives me to and from set. You guys want him to act? No, I mean, but let's be fair. There's nothing for Alec Baldwin to do in this movie. This is maybe a Billy Baldwin joint. Like, there's no reason to have Alec Baldwin in this.
I would say a Stephen Baldwin joint even.
Oh, you think it could go as high as Stephen? Okay. I mean, we're at the bottom of the Baldwin bucket here, but, like, there's nothing for him to do. And if I'm being honest, I don't even think his performance is bad in this movie.
I don't think
he's absolutely fine in this movie for what he needs to do.
Danny Baldwin does a very serviceable job of being like a lecherous second in command.
Do I feel uncomfortable when he's alone with a woman in the room? Yes.
Yes.
Do I feel like he can pull the lever on a cable tow? Yes.
Yes.
Congratulations. You have done your job very well.
You have the job. That's it. I mean, again, this movie is just so simple and like kind of straight. You're like, cool. It's 2 immovable objects running towards each other. Like, again, it's vampire hunting. It's a little bit of a Western. There's some great horror stuff. There's some awesome kills in this movie.
This is my point though, right? This has on paper every single thing you want in a John Carpenter movie. This is an early, like if this movie had come out in the early 80s, you can only imagine the kind of film it could have been. This is why I think the 90s were not particularly kind to John Carpenter, right? We saw him make Ghost of Mars, which is essentially just not a very good version of a Snake Plissken movie, as he was going to make that the third Plissken flick, right?
Right.
He does have Mouth of Madness in the 90s, which is one of my favorite movies he ever made. But it's kind of more of a horror movie ghost, story than has any action in it. Escape from L.A. is an absolutely phenomenal array of decisions, right?
Yes.
This one, though, I think this one has every single thing you want in a Carpenter. You got a group of awesome tough guy characters. You've got horror with awesome fucking monsters, amazing effect work. You have really good mythology. The idea that the Catholics created the first vampire. There's also this thing in the movie that just kind of comes and goes. The rules of the Slayer, right? Where it's like Wedding Crashers, where he's just like, rule number 10. A guy doesn't bury his teammates alone. Fuck your rule. Rule number 7.
Yeah. I
don't
like that
do
stuff.
this. And he goes, fuck.
It's a nice little,
This is the thing, though.
the Wedding Crashers thing.
Crow doesn't follow any of the 3 rules that we know about.
Zero.
You know? So it's just another one of those, like, why have the rules? But, like, so it has everything you want. My question is, why does this movie in the late 90s, why does Ghost of Mars, they feel like they have all the kind of stuff you want. And this one has a dramatically better script than Ghost of Mars. This one's way better from the start.
Right.
Why these? Is it just literally that James Wood is so fucking hateable that this movie just feels so clunky at times?
Yeah, I mean, I think because there's no one that you feel you must. I think truly because there's no, like, we talked about Big Trouble in Little China earlier this week. I want to follow those characters around. I want them to succeed in their plans. I think the problem with vampires is that I don't care if these guys succeed. Whether they do or not is inconsequential because I really don't. Because, again, like, there's no one to root for. There's no globbing onto a character.
Because this is the thing. Even the priest, right, who could have been that guy, he still is withholding information from his hero
total dick.
that he needs to solve the case. You're like, that's not a lying priest.
Right. Again, there's
the guy who's
nobody...
like, hey, if he gets this thing, he's going to be unstoppable. I better wait until James Wood starts. It's almost like he wants to get cut on in the bathroom. Like, what are you doing, priest?
Well, there's just so much about this movie that should work and doesn't. But in the ways that I normally expect these smaller movies like this to work. Like, this movie has awesome, bigger pieces. It's the smaller stuff that kind of loses momentum for me, and I think that's really strange. But again, it's
that's why this movie I feel like there is somewhat a curse of the 90s on this, right? Where the things with the action and the prosthetics and all that gets blown up and it becomes louder. But our main character just becomes dumber and thinner. And so something like Escape from New York, that world is so fucking fun. And Snake Plissken himself is very thin.
Yes.
But he becomes iconic because he's this tough guy walking around this world full of interesting characters. The Brain, the Duke,
right?
President Dewey. Like all these things, right, that are really fun and interesting characters explaining the world. In this one, we gut all of the interesting characters around and hope James Wood pulls us in. At the end, when he tackles that board and hits Valak with sunlight, one, you're like, wildly anticlimactic. Like, we literally just went from, night exorcism ritual, James Wood on a cross to, boards, sun. And that's how you defeat the most powerful vampire of all time.
Yeah.
And I was with you. I was like,
at the end.
When he walks in with that cross, like, you're already holding the thing you need to make sure that Valak can't do what he wants. Throw that in the van and then go get his ass. And you're just like, if James Wood gets decapitated, like, all right.
That's fine.
I don't
Yeah,
care.
exactly. I'm not rooting for James Woods to finish the mission. I don't care.
Yeah, well, there's no wish fulfillment for me when they kill Valak and at the end he's like, hey, priest, tell me about your boner stabbing vampires. And I'm like, those scamps, I can't wait to do that some more. Like, I want to hear more about the mahogany he got stabbing vampires. And I guess they do. That's their heartwarming, like, well, Lesser Baldwin, you drove your brother to set, took his job, and now you're driving away with the girl. I'm still going to come fucking murder you. And I was like, is that like the heartfelt? And then they hug it out.
Yeah, like the letting him go at the end, like, I'll give you a day head start. Like, oh, fuck you.
I was like, that's so fucking sweet.
Too little, too late. Dude, James Woods was really in character.
It's like in Dark Knight when Batman lets himself be the villain for Harvey. It means emotionally the exact same thing.
Yes, definitely those two emotional beats very similar.
Yeah, he's just like, I really want to kill you, but I'm so interested in what vampire murder does for erections.
I found another trivia tidbit that I wanted to run past you about this movie. The original director who was supposed to do this before John Carpenter signed on. Do you know who it is?
I mean, fuck, who would have been doing this kind of movie at that time?
Again, something that is linked to you somehow. Russell Mulcahy, the director
Really?
of Highlander, was supposed to actually direct this movie.
This is actually opening up this entire alternate reality where Russell Mulcahy becomes John Carpenter and Kurt Russell becomes Christopher Lambert.
Yes. It's blowing my mind why we keep coming up with this.
You know what's strange? I could see Mulcahy really doing well with this movie.
Yeah, I can too. Actually, I was reading and he had a whole different take on the story itself.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
I would be interested.
It's the thing. This is something. It's hard because we picked this movie because we both remembered liking it, and then we watched it and we didn't love it as much as we want. And on this show, we try really hard, right? If you're spending time with us, we assume that you love movies, so we think it's our job to talk about movies that we love, also, right? Like, you don't want to come on our show and us say, "You fucking moron." You like vampires, you fucking idiot. And that's what I don't want to do with this show, right? But it is one of those fascinating when you just age and a movie changes on you. When I was in high school, I loved this fucking movie. And I think now I'm a little more older and I'm more hung up on the fact that these guys fucking suck. And it really is hard because it has all the building blocks. And I do wonder, it's just two changes. And this is the other thing. I don't like us on this show saying, hey, we could rewrite your movie better because clearly we're both unsuccessful screenwriters.
Yeah.
But I do wonder, I was like, by the way, if the main actor was the priest and then we just had to suffer Baldwin and Woods as part of our job and see that the monster hunter has become the monster, that's a classic movie. At least then the priest who's not lying about, the Black Cross or whatever and is truly being as helpful as he can and honorable, maybe then, and then seeing him maybe go a little too far, right? He's close to the edge. Maybe that's something to latch onto. Maybe if we just have more hunters, so you can see more of this kind of horrible guy who's had a hard life and bad job spread out.
Right.
Maybe that's it. It is weird because on paper, I should love every single thing about this movie. But watching James Wood act in it, who, again, I think is a really great actor. I'm not saying this because he's become an absolute fucking Valak on Twitter. It's just because in this movie, that main character is so fucking hateable. It's just so strange to me where I find myself with vampires after all this time.
It's a peculiar thing. And I mean, yeah.
I mean, okay, so answer me that. Is it really just that there is no one to root for? I mean, because I don't think there's like big structural problems with the film. It feels like it has everything.
The movie moves fine. And I mean, there is like some weird pacing issues I have. Like after they crash the car and they just sort of do that weird like Stranger Than Paradise thing for about 5 minutes where they're just like sitting on the side of the road.
Also, you're like, I don't need to know that they have to steal a car to get back. Like, just
I don't give a shit.
Just
about
have them show up in a different car and I'll understand.
But I really truly believe, and again, this is like, yes, we're older and like we've watched a lot of movies and we've spent a lot of time talking about this kind of thing. And I truly and honestly believe when movies don't work for us, it's because we don't have anyone to root for. And I think
feels to be one of our, because I remember when you did not like Humanoids of the Deep, that was part of it, right? Like there are just movies sometimes, like, and I don't know, because I was like, maybe I'm crazy, and it's just because my wife kept being like, fucking really? Like, we're smacking the lady again, and and I was like, yeah, I get it. Like, these guys suck. Yeah. Like, I don't think the movie's saying that they're cool for doing that.
No, I don't think it is either. But I do think there's a veracity to the need for us to have people that we like in a movie. And I think when we watch characters that are like wholly irredeemable, it's really difficult to say like, oh, it's interesting. It factors heavily into like me being able to go like, well, that was a good movie. Like, even characters that I don't necessarily think are good people, like Snake Plissken, I still enjoyed.
Yeah, he's a bad guy.
He's a terrible person. I still enjoy the movies that are made about him, though.
John Hammond from Jurassic Park. Horrible piece of shit, man.
John Hammond, huge piece of shit. And yet,
yeah,
I'm still watching Jurassic Park.
It's so strange. I even thought, like, what if there was an extra scene? Like, they have that great, hilarious moment where Driving Miss Baldwin comes back at the end, right? And he does that amazing. He pops up and shoots the cross. And I was like, well, just the physics of that are all wrong. I was like, what if that scene ends with they pull the cross down and fucking James Wood is just splattered and then dragged across the road. And they're like, oh, shit, Crow's dead. And then the priest just walks off by himself at the end after having killed Baldwin.
That would have been fine.
Would that have been I just keep thinking, I'm like, this movie has everything I like. 65 to 70% of the movie I really enjoy myself watching. There's just these moments with these two guys that I can't fucking stand. And with seeing them not as the main lens or seeing them killed by the end, how much would that increase the value of this film to me? 20%? 50%?
This is like, it's the real question of the pod itself is that, like, why do we enjoy this movie? Well, we don't now. We did at another time, but the question is why.
And I wouldn't say I didn't enjoy it. It's just one of those. Not
enjoyed, but, like, it's one of those things where, like, I don't have anyone to root for. So, like, I get to the end of the movie and I'm like, oh, that was a movie. Cool. Well, at least it wasn't over 2 hours long. Like, that's the biggest thing. So,
yeah.
I don't know.
It's strange. Again, and we hate not being more optimistic about a movie. I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think we said a lot of stuff that worked really well. I was really into the Catholics creating the first vampire. That's such a fucking awesome. Good riff.
That's a great beat, man.
It's such a good riff. I don't know. I love those teams of guy movies, too. Like, it is the Dungeons and Dragons players in me. The team of Slayers trying to make it to... Like, there's a movie that came out, this terrible King Arthur movie that came out in, like, 2008, whatever, right? You remember that with Clive Owen?
With Clive Owen, yeah.
Yeah, I remember everyone was like, this movie sucks. And I was like, what? Because they just had this gang of guys running through a forest fighting people. Ray Stevens is in it. He like has a hammer or giant axe. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll do this movie.
Yeah, man.
They have a Falconeer who is Mads Milken, I believe. I'm like, yeah, all this movie works for me now. I'm cool. So it doesn't take a lot. It hurts me when a movie sours in my mouth, right? I feel like a vampire who goes to eat a Big Mac. You're like, I only like some blood now. The ketchup no longer works. All right, guys, that's it for Vampires. I hope you liked it way, way more than we did. Again, a movie that had so much going for it, and just something didn't click all the way in for us, man. But we will be back with more Carpenter this month. You will be hearing Mouth of Madness that I will be recording with my friends Mike Cloud and Kevin Weinman. Cloud has been harassing me to do Mouth of Madness since we started the pod. So I felt like I could not possibly not let him join us for that.
Important.
Yeah, we have some other good stuff coming up on our way to Carpenter. You guys selected The Fog as well, what we will wrap the month up with. And a couple more surprises if we can get them in for you. As always, please take a second, leave us a rating and review wherever you find pods, especially if that happens to be Apple Podcast app. That helps us out a ton. Subscribe to our channel, our YouTube channel, if you want to see our faces and hear our voices. I'm sure James Wood won't be doing that now. That's Nerd Alchemist, plural with an S at the end. You can email the show, filmalchemistpod@gmail.com. If you would like to have us talk about some movies, any ideas, themes, double features, guests, anything like that, we love to hear from you guys. On that note, you can also find us on every social media platform. If you're there, we're there, and we want to talk to you guys. All right, we'll be back with more John Carpenter goodness for the Film Alchemist. I'm Josh Griffey.
I'm Alex Dandino.